Afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much. Hi, Tony. Good afternoon. Before we begin today's meeting, I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind you that this is a hybrid meeting, so colleagues are joining us online. I would ask for everyone's patience regarding that. Furthermore, the meeting is being recorded and live streamed, and the recording will be made available for public viewing on the Council's YouTube channel. To help with the smooth running of the meeting, if you are joining remotely, I would be grateful if you would mute your microphone when you're not speaking, use the raise your hand function on Teams when you'd like to raise an issue, and to lower it again when you're finished speaking, and not to use the chat function on Teams amongst one another. For those of us in the chamber, please remember to activate your microphone when speaking and to turn it off when finished. This is to ensure that the people online can hear what you're saying, and also that what your contributions picked up for the online recording. Myself and the officers attending will monitor proceedings with a view to ensuring all requests to speak are seen. Officers attending today's meeting are quite a contingent today, so I'll just go through them all. We're joined by Louise Pringle, the Director of Business Operations and Partnerships. She's here just now, yep. We're joined by Michelle Blair, the Chief Auditor, Barbara Clark, our Chief Accountant, Jill Derbyshire, the Chief Executive's Business Manager, Kath McCormack, our HR Manager, Alison Bolinol, Senior Revenues Manager, Linda Hutchison, Clerk to the Committee, John Burke, Committee Services Officer, Leona Allison, Assistant Committee Services Officer, and both John Boyd and Lisa Yule from Audit Scotland. I believe this is your first time attending the committee, John, so welcome along. Now, we'll get started with the items on the agenda. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. I have Councillor David MacDonald. Clerk, do you have any others?
Yes, we have Councillor Annette Ireland, and can I just confirm we're not live streaming the meeting, but it will be put on the YouTube channel. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that correction. Agenda item 2, are there any declarations of interest? No, okay, that's fine. Agenda item 3 is the Chair's report. I have quite a lot to say at item 10. It's a report I'm leading on, so I'll hold off my comments until that stage. Which brings us on to agenda item 4, which is a couple of points of clarification on queries raised at the previous meeting, and I'd like to ask Linda Hutchison, Clerk to the Committee, to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, really for transparency, this report just summarises the clarification that's already been circulated to members on queries that were raised at the previous meeting. It was on 2 Treasury management issues, so the report is for noting unless you're otherwise minded.
I'm happy with that. Does any members have any questions? Yeah, okay, I think we're quite happy to move on then. So, item number 5 is an annual report on managing absence, and I'd like to invite Kath McCormack, HR Manager, to speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to take you through the key points from the annual absence report. So the purpose of the report is to update the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the Council's sickness absence levels and our approach as a Council to managing absence. So just to talk briefly around the absence data for 21-22. There has been an increase in local government employee absence, with days lost per FTE at 12.33 days. Compared with 2021, this is an increase 2.17 days. Teacher absence has also increased, only slightly though, by 0.53 days when compared to the previous year. And so in 21-22, it was 4.14 days. The Council's overall absence lost per FTE was 9.44 days, which is an increase of 1.66 days on the previous year. It should be noted, however, that local government and teacher absence have both improved when compared to pre-COVID figures, and there's been a decrease of 0.67 days and 1.06 days respectively. The top 3 reasons for absence continue to be the same year on year, with stress non-work related, musculoskeletal and gastrointestinal disorders being the top reasons. In the report, I've included a copy of the local government benchmarking framework data. This data shows the comparisons of sickness absence between local government and teacher data across each council. You'll note in the report that we did have an issue with the previous year's data, which has now been rectified. And in terms of the placing, so it does place us against other councils. We haven't got the data yet for 21-22. I'd just like to move on to COVID absence. In 21-22, COVID absence over 12 weeks or absence related to the COVID vaccine resulted in 1,852 days lost. Absences under 12 weeks were not recorded as absence, they were recorded as special leave. Since July 2022, all absences related to COVID are now included in sickness absence data. I would just like to point out that the CMT continues to support the focus on absence management and improvement. From analysis and the absence monitoring, it is evident that employees who carry out frontline services within the councils have got higher levels of absence in comparison to other council services. We do continue to have a robust absence management strategy to ensure our policies are applied consistently. And HR do continue to have meetings with managers in hotspot areas to support them. We use the capability guidance to manage long-term absences, and we've had 5 dismissals due to this in the past year and 20 ill health retirements. East End Council does continue to support health and wellbeing of our employees, and we facilitate a lot of awareness sessions. Managers are encouraged to use resources available to them, such as flexibility in terms of the flexible work policy to support our staff with work-life balance, and also we look at stress risk assessments as well. The HR team does continue to support managers, as I mentioned, on a range of cases. In 21-22, we supported around 350 absence cases across our workforce. This may appear high, however, it should be noted that our employee population is really mixed when compared to the private sector. And we have seen over the last 12 months some really complex, difficult matters that our staff have been going through in terms of serious health conditions, social economic issues, substance abuse and personal tragedies. Support has been provided to ensure cases are managed correctly and in line with policy. To conclude, the Council's overall absence performance has increased across local government and teacher absence. However, it has improved compared to pre-COVID times. And mental health will continue to have focus, ensuring our appropriate resources and strategies are in place for our employees, and HR will continue to encourage our management teams to participate in training in order to develop a confident approach to dealing with mental health. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Kath. I'd like to ask a question before opening it up to the floor. And it's regarding working from home and the impact that may have on absenteeism and stress levels. Is there any indication that working from home has helped to reduce the level of absenteeism, or is it potentially a driver for stress? And if so, what could the council do about making that better for its staff?
Firstly, it's worth pointing out that we've got about 4,500 employees, and actually only about 500 of those could be deemed to be hybrid. And we certainly see the majority of our absence cases being in those frontline office-based. We have got a number of initiatives in terms of we have the switch off guidance to staff, and we have also been looking at really making sure our staff are aware of health and wellbeing, getting away from the computer. Because we do understand how easy it is once you're in front of the computer to stay sat at that computer all day long. So we also have a health and wellbeing strategy as well, which we're really trying to push with our staff. And again, we're trying to take into account all our staffing groups, not just one in particular. But it's certainly still a focus, and stress is a concern for us.
That's great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the Chamber? And I note that Provost Murphy has a question online too. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Everything that we've just heard today, we could have heard. It's just a repeat of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm interested to hear, just from, through you, Chair, what is the difference between public sector and private sector as far as absenteeism is concerned? You've mentioned things like complex, difficult situations like substance abuse. I mean, have we got a particular problem with substance abuse in this council, or is that a public sector thing? I'm just trying to get to the core of this, because I just feel every time the Audit Committee looks at this, and every year it happens, we always put forward excuses as to why this is happening. And yet, over that period of time, we don't actually seem to be seeing any particular improvement. And I would question as to whether this is a cultural thing. Why is it? Our teachers seem to have a relatively complex-free health by comparison, and yet the majority of our employees seem to have difficulties with in absenteeism. As I say, we seem to be doing this every year. We don't seem to be getting to the bottom of it. Do we just have to accept that this is part of public sector? Because particularly now, when I'm thinking of the council taxpayers that are out there, the people that are actually paying for this absenteeism, I'm really asking on their behalf as to why it's a particular problem in East Renfrewshire, or indeed the public sector. Thank you.
Well, that is why we're auditing scrutiny, I guess. So thank you for that, Councillor Boss. Are you okay with that one, Catherine, please?
Sorry, because in the report under point 15, I had referenced the Office for National Statistics confirmed that there were differences between the public sector and the private sector, and it was really to do with the types of jobs. And there was also a potential link between occupational sick pay as well, because in the public sector, we do pay more levels of sick pay compared to, say, the private sector, which would probably be at least half, I would say, in my experience from private sector organisations. But I would say it is the types of roles we have. We have an ageing workforce as well that can attribute to absence levels. Thank you.
Okay. Any follow-up to that, Councillor Boss?
I just want to challenge this ageing workforce. I mean, everybody's got ageing workforces. I mean, my particular trade that I'm in, the average age of a butcher is actually about 59. And I can tell you now, there's no absenteeism that reflects anything like this in a hard, very hard physical job. I just feel, Chair, that we seem to year on year be making excuses without actually getting to the bottom of what the problems are and what we can do to tackle it. I hate to think what this is actually. Do we actually have a figure of what this is costing? Absenteeism is costing this council. Thank you.
Is there any figure available at the moment, or is that something you might have to report back on?
Yeah, I haven't got a figure at the moment, but I could produce that for a further meeting.
I think that could be of interest to all members of the committee. Thank you. Provost Montague, I appreciate being waiting online for some time. If you'd like to ask your question.
That's fine. Can I just check you can hear me all right? I'm a bit hoarse. I'm not
Yes,
impressed.
yes, you're loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. So it's just a wee bit of background. I served on a previous audit and scrutiny committee with the former councillor, the late Ian Drysdale. And what, as yourself, Chair, has referred to on a number of occasions on this apolitical committee, the aim in practice was not only quantitative, that is looking at numbers, but also qualitative. How could we improve services and policies? And we did this amicably and as a team without any party differences. I'd like, on this aspect of this agenda item, to raise some aspects of women's health and possibly absences, and in particular the effect of monthly periods on women. That is pain, menstrual migraines, vomiting, extreme exhaustion, premenstrual anxiety, heavy bleeding, and can I ask if women workers have been asked if they need support about this? And if not, could a questionnaire please be conducted to find out? Because women and girls, in my experience, too often suffer in silence. They put up with these symptoms and attend work while they're debilitated with what is still too often regarded as a taboo or an embarrassing subject. So yes, more attention is being given to the effects of menopause, but if appropriate, could consideration be given to this period aspect of women's health, and also what support is being offered about this? but also on the subject of another sensitive subject, and that is violence against women. So finally, and thank you for your forbearance in allowing me these comments, but I feel it's important. Given our role of scrutiny, could we have a presentation in these issues with the addition of any best practice regarding supporting women workers, given that women are still predominantly the family carers, and also that I understand that it's 75% of our council's workforce are women. So I'm just asking for such a presentation about how we're supporting our women in the workplace. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm aware that female employees, I think, constitute around 75% of the workforce in East Ribster Council, so it's a very salient issue. If you'd like to address that, please, Kath.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, certainly in terms of violence against women and girls, East Rend Council has been working with Women's Aid on a pilot of training for managers to educate them on this area and the support that we should be providing. So that would certainly be something that we could pull a report, a presentation about. In terms of Women's Matters, we have an equality group, an equality working group for the council, and we are looking at different areas that we could have employee groups about. So that's certainly an area that we could ask the group if they would be interested in creating. And the other point around, I guess, periods, my understanding from absence data is we do record this under gynecological matters. We're not aware, I guess, at the moment of it being a bigger issue than, say, menopause, but again, it's something that we could certainly look at. I know that if there were particular issues with women, they would be dealt with locally by managers, but again, I'd be happy to pull a report or presentation together.
That's much appreciated, thank you. Councillor Edlin, I believe you wish to speak.
Yeah, given Councillor Wallace's comments, I have concerns that the absence level at the council may be higher than we would like it to be at current times. And I wondered if the professional staff could prepare a paper on this outlining a comparison with other public bodies and private bodies, private corporations, etc., to see how we are doing in managing absences and, if necessary, come forward with recommendations on how we can improve this, given that we are really our residents, the people we represent, are paying for this service, and it's important that we have this managed very efficiently so that there's no wastage of the council tax revenue.
Yep. Thank you very much. I mean, I should appreciate, Councillor Edlin, that pursuing best value is incumbent on all councillors, and that is something that you'll find very important. If you'd like to address those points, please, Kath.
I would hope that this report would cover some of those aspects, but certainly for future reports we could definitely include more benchmarking data around private organisations, because this report does actually include other councils. It's got a table with the other councils, how we perform against those in Scotland, but we could include further data if required.
Yeah, I mean, the 2022 comparison across the 32 authorities in Scotland, that data is not fully available yet. I can see that we were 21st in the 2021 year, so there will be some further information on that to come in terms of where East Renfrewshire Council stands in relation to Scotland's other councils. Does that answer your point, Councillor Edlin, or anything else?
I think so. I need to reflect on it, perhaps. But I do feel the levels are very high and worrying.
Thank you. Provost Montague, I see your hand is raised. I don't know if that's a legacy hand or if you wish to raise another point.
No, can I raise another point, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course. And then Councillor Buchanan.
All right, thank you. It's on the aspect of the musculoskeletal problems that is very often referred to as back problems, and the accepted link between sitting and such problems. Sitting is known to be bad for your health in a number of ways, and I wonder if, as a council, we're providing the opportunity for people to stand rather than sit, you know, in the workplace. Thank you.
Kath?
Yeah, certainly we can make available desks for staff that are actually able to raise so they can stand up at their desks. I guess a lot of our musculoskeletal cases are in, again, frontline roles like in health and social care, where perhaps sitting may not always be possible, and it is attributed to the heavy lifting perhaps. But certainly if it was a desk-based person, we could look at that as an option.
Thank you. And Councillor Buchanan online.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's good to see that some things never change, and we still face the usual attacks on our staff for having been off sick, and indeed complaints about them actually being paid while they're off sick. But nonetheless, can I thank Kath for the report? I think the figures over the years, we can look at the various aspects that are made in terms of where our staff are. But given the work that our staff have done, particularly through the pandemic, and that these staff were on the front line day in and day out, still delivering services, still performing their duties, then I think the figures actually don't look too bad. I think we will see over the next few months and years additional stresses coming to bear as a follow-on from the pandemic. And that's going to be interesting to see just where that goes. But quite clearly, I think we've looked at it over the years. Our figures, I don't think, we may lie 10th in some occasions, we may lie 21st on others, but my understanding and from previous reading of those figures, they are very close. There's not much in the differences in terms of the delineation between the authorities. I think the public sector goes out and works on the front line day in, day out. And I think we're comparable with across whether it be health services, etc. Those figures can probably be looked at in the round. People who are out in the front line, there is an age demographic as well, but they face many more issues than many might do in the private sector. And those are challenging in themselves, whether that be lifting patients, whether it be the issues and facing people with a variety of different issues going on. And that in itself can be extremely stressful and taxing. I think our staff do a fantastic job in very difficult circumstances, as does anyone who works across the public sector. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wallace.
Chair, this is an audit committee. We're here to ask questions. I don't really feel that we're here to answer these. I would prefer to get an answer from an officer, somebody who's actually working, rather than a fellow audit committee member. This sounds more like politics to me than it does actually getting to the bottom of the problem. And this is one reason why 5 years ago I remember coming to this committee, and it ended up turning into it was probably about the worst performance of it was like a council chamber rather than an audit committee. Just through you, Chair, just ask that we conduct ourselves not politically, but asking fair and reasonable questions, and not expecting other members of the audit committee to be answering on behalf of the officers. We've got extraordinary professional individuals around us who I think are much better able to answer questions than, well, I won't name names. Thank you.
Okay. Noting all that, Councillor Edlin, and then
I would second Councillor Wallace's comments. I have the highest regards for our professional staff, and this is a scrutiny committee, and well, I do note that Councillor Buchanan is a trade unionist, and I feel that his comments are inappropriate to this committee, and the tone of them are offensive.
Okay. Well, everyone's obviously made their own comments as they see fit. I think that now we should move on. Certainly, from one point of view, I think that it's important to tackle absence, not from the point of view of encouraging staff to do their jobs as best they can and to help redress any underlying health issues. And I think we should take in good faith the points that are made. So just to agree then, so we're happy to note the report. Kath, you're going to look at a strategy for issues around women's health and domestic abuse, and how we can support female members of the workplace, and also potentially other options we could look at to further support staff and reduce absence levels. Okay, noted. Okay, moving on then to... Sorry?
Can I just confirm, is Kath to provide some financial figures? That was another thing that was mentioned at one point.
Yes, because obviously in some work roles we need to employ agency staff or deploy other staff, so there would be a cost implication of doing that, so that would be helpful. So, thank you. Okay, so agenda item 6 is the National Fraud Initiative update. Report by Alison Bollinall, Senior Revenues Manager.
Thank you. The National Fraud Initiative in Scotland is a counter-fraud exercise led by Audit Scotland and overseen by the Cabinet Office for the UK as a whole. It uses computerised techniques to compare information about individuals held by different public bodies and on different financial systems that might suggest the existence of fraud or error. It means that public bodies can take action if any fraud or error has taken place, and it allows auditors to assess fraud prevention arrangements with which those bodies have. In East Renfrewshire Council, we have a single point of contact for NFI, and that sits within my revenues team. They coordinate the data returns and ensure that results are circulated to services for action. To make the most of NFI, we should be investigating data matches, identifying fraud and errors and stopping them, recovering any overpayments and improving systems as a result. The most recent exercise in 2021 provided over 3,000 matches flagged to us through NFI. This was a reduction of around 1,000 on the previous exercise, and this was mainly due to the implementation of the new Integra finance and procurement system, which led to a more robust control environment. To date, recovery action has netted in the region of £77,000, and that was due mainly to the cancellation of single persons discounts. The report today gives a broad overview of the NFI process and outcomes and confirms that ERC have a robust and effective approach to NFI. I'm happy to answer any questions or obtain further information if required.
That's great, thank you, Alison. Not quite a question for me, but just to note that I understand in the past the Chair of Audit and Scrutiny has previously circulated a memorandum to staff on whistleblowing. I think with staff working from home, working the hybrid model, perhaps not being in the office and seeing things all day, it might be quite helpful to repeat that exercise if that's seen as being helpful.
Yeah, certainly.
That's great, thank you. Any members of the committee have any questions on this item? Quite happy to note then? Okay. So, agenda item 7, we're staying with fraud and corruption, managing the risk of fraud and corruption, fraud response statement 2021-22, a report by Jill Derbyshire.
Thank you very much. In order to demonstrate compliance with the Code of Corporate Governance, this fraud response statement provides an overview of the measures in place across East Renfrewshire Council to address anti-fraud, bribery and theft, managing the risk of fraud and corruption, and to provide an update on actions undertaken during 2021-22 where appropriate. In addition, this report includes East Renfrewshire Council's response to the Fraud and Irregularities report published by Audit Scotland in July 2022, which included a number of specific recommendations. The Council is committed to fighting fraud and bribery in order to protect public funds, and a wide range of measures are in place to address and prevent fraud, bribery and theft, involving many services and areas across the Council. These measures are set out within the report under the broad headings of governance, ICT and cybercrime, procurement, health and wellbeing, and payment, insurance, payroll and HR. As mentioned specifically in the Audit Scotland report, the National Fraud Initiative is a way in which to reduce counter-fraud risks. As you've just heard in the previous report, East Renfrewshire Council has an effective approach in this matter. The Audit and Scrutiny Committee provides a scrutiny role in relation to this area of work. Investigations are normally undertaken by the internal audit team, and during 2021-22, a total of 3 potential fraud matters were brought to the committee's attention and investigated. It's recommended that the Audit and Scrutiny Committee consider and note the contents of the fraud response statement and the work undertaken across the Council, and considers the feedback provided in the context of the comments made to the Audit Scotland report. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Jill. It's perhaps yourself that I would liaise with to take forward a circular to staff. Thank you for the report. Does anyone have any questions on aspects raised? Nothing online? No. Mark?
Chair, I was just going to say, just to remind the committee, that one of the recommendations that was made from the self-evaluation was this issue about circulating information to people about the whistleblowing arrangements. And in fact, I think the recommendation went a wee bit further and suggested you might want to do something through the communications team under your name. So that would certainly address that.
Yeah, thank you, Clerk. I'd be certainly quite happy to do that. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. It's on a kind of related subject. I know we got huge sums of money from Westminster for the monies to be laid out for COVID, etc., in order to help things that were very difficult at the time. With this fraud, we were actually handing out quite large sums of money to businesses and individuals, which was carried out by our own accountancy team. I think helped by some of the audit personnel as well. I appreciate this is not necessarily within the council itself. Do we, from a previous audit committee, I seem to recall that all the funds were dispersed according to how it was laid down, and that's how internal audit looked at it. I'm curious as to know as to whether we found out whether any of these sums that were claimed by individuals and sent out to individuals were correctly asked for, if you like. I'm just concerned that we may well have had measures in place in order to disperse these funds. Was there anything within it that made sure that those that were asking for these sums were correct in doing so?
So basically in fraudulent claims?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if there were any instances of that, but if you'd like to address the points raised by Councillor Wallace.
Councillor Wallace is correct that we only looked at it in terms of what Scottish Government guidance was. So I don't know whether an exercise has been carried out at another level, but we're certainly not looking at it because they complied with the guidance that we had at the time.
Yes, Libby's Pringle, and then I'll come back to Councillor Wallace.
I don't have specific details, Councillor Wallace. My team, Alison's team, were involved in that. So a lot of the business grants that went out went first into the economic development team, who had a process in place for checking eligibility for those grants and against the criteria that the government would have set. And they then passed those to the accounts payable team to pay out the money for the grants. And there was a further compliance piece done in terms of financial control and checking of bank details and things that was done as part of that, as part of our financial controls. So I do believe there was checking of eligibility and checking that payments went to the right people using financial controls.
Councillor Wallace. Yeah.
If I could perhaps just come back, from your own kind of professional experience, did you feel that the measures that were in place in order to ensure that these claims were legitimate, do you feel that the checks and balances that were in place were sufficient in order to ensure that there would be no fraudulent claims that managed to get through? Thanks.
To the best of my knowledge, but I haven't checked that myself specifically, but I do believe economic development did have robust controls in place but you would need to talk to economic development for further details on that, to be honest.
There is a forthcoming report from Audit Scotland which I've reviewed, which will be raised at a future. It's one of the reports I'm leading on in the specialisation arrangement. I think obviously sent it over to me previously, Clerk, and that's to come up at a forthcoming meeting where we can look at the payment of these COVID-19 grants and the payments under the Scottish Strategic Framework Fund in a wee bit more detail. Any other questions? No, I'm not seeing anything online either, so take the report as noted and move on to item 8, which is the review of the Strategic Risk Register and Risk Management Process. This is a biannual report by Jill Derbyshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This report provides the latest biannual update of the Council's Strategic Risk Register and a summary of risk management progress. The previous update of the Strategic Risk Register was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 7th of April 2022. The Strategic Risk Register Appendix 1 sets out the key strategic risks to be considered by the Council and details the actions that management have put in place to manage these risks. Since the Strategic Risk Register was considered by the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, a thorough review of all risks has been undertaken on the register has been undertaken. Currently, 7 risks remain as high, 4 risks were rescored from high to medium, 1 risk was rescored from medium to high, 2 risks were added to the register, and 4 risks have been removed from the Strategic Risk Register. Within the report, a risk tolerance map is included and the risk distribution by outcome is also there for information. The corporate management team continues to discuss and review the Strategic Risk Register on a regular basis, and it remains a standing item on the CMT agenda. Following a suggestion by Audit Scotland at the last Audit and Scrutiny Committee, high-level information on areas which could, at some point in the future, reach a level where they would then result in a risk to the Council and could be added to the Strategic Risk Register, so-called horizon scanning, has been included in the report for the first time. The Strategic Risk Register is reported every 6 months to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee and annually to the Cabinet. There are currently 38 risks on the Strategic Risk Register, of which 8 are classified as high. In terms of wider risk management work, a review of the risk management strategy is currently being undertaken, and a new risk management strategy will be prepared in due course to ensure that the appropriate approach to risk management continues to meet the needs of East Renfrewshire Council. It should be noted that the development of the Strategic Risk Register is considered a live document, and it will be updated and amended by the corporate management team as appropriate. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Jill. Does anyone have any questions on this? Councillor Wallace.
I wonder if I might ask, is independence mentioned in the risk register at all? Thank you.
The risk of independence is measured in the horizon scanning as an area that the corporate management team, along with many others, would keep under review.
Councillor Wallace.
Just when you say horizon scanning, I mean, from what I can understand, there's going to be an independence referendum next year. That's what our Scottish Government are telling us. Is that not something that you feel should be on our risk register, be it low, medium, high risk? Thank you.
As I understand it, the corporate management team consider to keep all these risks under review, and if such a risk were to materialise, it would be included at this point.
Okay, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, have you made any recommendations to the CMT that perhaps they should be looking at this for the risk register?
My view would be the CMT continue to look at this, and if they considered that a risk was appropriate, a risk would at this point be added.
Chair, if I might ask that we actually include independence into the risk register. It's coming towards the audit committee, and I feel that it's something that should definitely be put down here. Thank you.
Okay, Clark.
No, it was just to say for your information. I appreciate this is the first time this report has come to this particular committee. They come twice a year. And it's quite commonplace for comments like that to be made, and we normally minute in the minute of the discussion that any comments or suggestions made like that are fed back to the corporate management team by Jill for them to consider. So that can certainly be included in the minute and fed back.
If I might ask then, Chair.
Yes, then I must come to Provost Montague. Has been waiting for a while, but yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I might ask, if the advice is going to CMT, or the suggestion, should I say, is going to the SMT, but what audit committee or a member of the audit committee felt about that, could we actually have their response to that, so that we can understand as to why it perhaps is going to be left off the risk register? Thank you.
I'm sure I'm right in saying anything that's considered for the risk register would be brought to the committee. Would that be correct? Okay, thanks. Provost Montague.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's point 11, the rescoring of a risk there from medium to high, and it is really to express concern about that. It's generally accepted how important these early years are for a number of reasons. And so it says locally addresses the principle of quality, flexibility, accessibility and affordability, but there's also the equality aspect there. And given, that children who are living with poverty and other challenges in their lives, this provision is really important. So I would ask if we could keep an eye on this, and if we could hear going forward what can be done to redress this.
Thank you, Provost. I believe it is mentioned in the risk register what mitigations can be put in place. Jill, I don't know if it's worth referencing that.
That's correct. The only information I would have would be the mitigations currently in place, and the Department of Education are, of course, looking at this very carefully.
That's great, thank you. And just to mop up, any final questions? Happy to note the report then? Okay. Agenda item 9, it's a local external audit report by external auditors, Audit Scotland, what we call a management report. I'd like to invite John Boyd and Lisa Rigo from Audit Scotland to speak to this. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for your warm welcome to the committee. In front of you, you have our external audit management report. The report summarises the findings and conclusions of our interim audit review. Under auditing standards, we're required to communicate to those charged with governance, in the case of the Council, being the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, regularly throughout the audit, and this essentially summarises the conclusions from our interim audit work, which is focusing on the overall control environment and our initial risk assessment. You'll see in section 3 of the report our overall conclusions, and I'm pleased to report there were no significant control deficiencies identified through our audit work. The report also includes a number of actions where we've identified opportunities to enhance internal controls and management's agreed responses to those. The report also summarises the impact in terms of our audit testing and our audit response when it comes to the audit of the financial statements to support our overall audit opinion. And this will be concluded within our annual external audit report, which is due in October. I wasn't planning on going through each of the individual points in detail, given there was no significant control deficiencies identified, but happy to take any questions on the report.
That's great, thank you, John. I'd like to kick off with a question, although it may be better answered by one of the officers and may be relevant to. It's concerning page 58, the recommendation on council tax billing. I believe due to change of system, some of the prior years' outstanding amounts have not been pursued because that data is temporarily not available due to the change in system. I was just wondering when we'll be able to be in a position to start redressing that, because I know it's got a target date of March 2023, but I'm sure we'll all be quite keen to not let debts build up for too long, especially when people face economic uncertainty.
Take that, Chair. We've started that recovery exercise now. That's out there just now in the field. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the floor or online? Councillor Edlin?
I'd just like to be excused at this point, please.
I know you have a prior engagement at 3.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Any other members? No. Okay, John, Lisa, I think you're getting off lightly this afternoon, so thank you very much for coming along, and thank you for your report and your hard work. So that takes us on to item 10, which is a review of a national external audit report. So it's a general overview, really, on local government in Scotland by Audit Scotland. Under the Council's specialisation arrangements, I have the Councillor leading the review on that. I have read through, and I have to say I think that we are doing what we should be doing. Audit Scotland helpfully provided a checklist for members to go through and ensure that we are meeting requirements. What we'd like to do in the future is, when a member of the committee is leading on a report, it's basically to set out a paragraph or two on what the main thrust of the report is. Of course, all members will be reading these, I'm sure, anyway. So, I've gone through, I mean, some of the points that I picked up on, closer working with the third sector, but I note that that was addressed in Louise Pringle's report, which was very extensive in response to this, and I'll shortly invite Louise to speak to that. Also a consideration on potential loss of staff or difficulties with retention and recruitment. Issues in the horizon with the National Care Service, issues around social care, workforce shortfalls, and do we have a COVID recovery plan? But I think some of these aspects were really, I didn't know off the top of my head because I'm a new elected member. It's not because the council aren't doing it. Louise, perhaps you've written quite an extensive report. Perhaps you'd like to say a wee bit more on it.
Thanks, Chair. As you say, this is an annual report that Audit Scotland produce, and it's a helpful report, and they also produce one around a financial overview, which is also a useful contextual setting document. I think in previous years we have sort of stepped back from providing such a detailed response to the committee just because of the wide-ranging nature of this. It's a lot of work, obviously, to pull together comments across the council for such a wide-ranging set of facts in the Audit Scotland paper, but we felt that as this was a new committee, and actually some of the issues in here are really pertinent to what we've been through the last couple of years, it was useful to prepare this for you this time. I think I would just really recognise the 6 key messages in the report, which are very much, they really strike a chord to our own local experience in East Renfrewshire. You know, I think councils have had a difficult year. They've had a difficult couple of years, actually, and I think some of that goes to the absence discussion earlier without wishing to restart that. I think it's the fact, you know, our services were out, they were working additional hours, they worked throughout the pandemic, we didn't furlough staff. And have had to take on additional duties while trying to keep services going as well, so the pandemic-related duties as well. And we're seeing the strain of that in our staff in terms of well-being, and perhaps not had good breaks, not had good holidays, etc., because they were trying to keep on these duties, and all credit to our staff for doing that. I think the report also references collaborative leadership being really important, and I think we've seen that very much as part of the pandemic, the joint response to the pandemic in terms of humanitarian support, in terms of services pulling together to support local communities through a really difficult time. That's been really important for us, and we are using that learning and those strengthened partnerships as we try to think about how to mitigate some of the cost of living challenges that we face now as well. I think we've mentioned the pressure on local government workforce. That will continue. We are concerned about the budget challenges ahead for councils generally, and what that will mean for our staff, and the worry that they will face as part of that, as well as the cost of living more generally in their lives. And I think what we've highlighted here is how we have used data to make decisions. We have used data to drive service improvements to support how we support our local communities, and we want to do more of that in various different spaces and have a range of different projects that will do that. So I suppose it's such a wide-ranging report. I'm not going to go through all of it for you. I suppose I'd be happy to try and take questions, or I might not have all the answers today because I've collated comments from colleagues, but we'll have a go. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you. I certainly did read it all and cross-referenced it to the points that I had. So thank you for that. Any members have any questions? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming around and just picking up some of your comments there. Yeah, just looking at managing the workforce, priorities, empowered, resilient, engaged employees, etc. I mean, it's all good, strong, positive approaches and worthy priorities. The question I would ask, given that how funding is going to be next year, and I think it's in public knowledge as well. I mean, it's all over the newspapers, etc. What are we doing in order to ensure that our staff are being properly communicated on this? Because I suspect there will be many thinking, well, crikey, is the axe going to fall somewhere near me? And I'm just concerned about people's general kind of feeling about the workplace at the moment and the possibility of being under threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. I add to that could well add to feelings of stress and the issues around absence management we were discussing earlier.
Absolutely, and it's something we are very, very concerned about for our own staff. None of us want to be in the position that we're in terms of the budget targets and challenges we have ahead of us. But all councils find themselves in that space just now, and we have unfortunately quite a long way to go in the budget process, and as we know from past experience, things move along that timeline, so we won't actually have our council settlement until December, later in December. But right now we are working with the Budget Strategy Group on a set of proposals from each department about what we could do should these targets need to be met, and what that will look like. There will be further, I think there's a document will come out, I think, next week, we're thinking, and that will be us starting our communications to the public and our staff about the size of the budget challenge that we have, the gap that we have, how we spend our money, and the pressures that the council faces in terms of different challenges like inflation, cost of energy, etc. on our services. So we're in the final stages of developing that document just now, and we believe that will come out next week, I think. So that's the start of us getting that message out there. There will be further iterations of that as we get through the budget process. The aim is to open up a public engagement on the scale of the budget savings and some of the proposals early in November, and run for November and the beginning of December, so that we can inform the Budget Strategy Group in December. We've briefed the unions on that today as part of a trade union management meeting. Not the detail of any proposals, but just kind of this outline set of circumstances, and the fact that communication is coming, and we'll work closely with them to involve our staff in that as well as the public, in terms of being able to shape these views going forward in these proposals. Thanks.
Quite happy, Councillor Wallace. Any supplementary to that, or? Okay. And online, I don't have any raised hands, so I think getting off lightly. Okay, that brings us to... Oh, Councillor Buchanan's just popped up on screen. Okay. That brings us to the end of the agenda and today's meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. So thank you very much, everyone who's come along. It's been a good contingent of you today. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.